Hey, thanks for checking out another episode of the Fat Guy Podcast. I am the Fat Guy. Most people just call me Brett Mason. I'm glad you've decided to join me today. Going to be talking about how I lost 14 pounds in 4 days. I don't want you to get too excited about that. It really happened, and I'll talk about it, but it's definitely not anything that you should strive for. It's not anything that you should set as a goal. Really not anything you should be concerned about. But it is possible to lose massive amounts of weight in a short period of time with a ketogenic diet when you first change over. So that'll be our discussion today. So a couple disclaimers. I'm not a doctor. I have no medical training, and I'm not here to give you any specific medical advice, and I'm not here to give you specific weight loss advice for you. I'm simply going to talk about my experiences and what's helped me and give my general overall opinions about a ketogenic diet, weight loss, etc. If you're going to begin a weight loss plan, you should always consult with a doctor. If you haven't followed us on social media, I'm phasing out Snapchat because now Instagram basically does the same thing, and there's too many things to post to. So if you were one of the people that was like, man, I like seeing when you post what you ate every day on Snapchat, that will now be happening on Instagram. So you can follow me there, Fat Guy Podcast. And on Facebook, Fat Guy Podcast. And if you're into Twitter, I'm not into Twitter that much, but I do send things over to Twitter intermittently. You can follow me there as well, Fat Guy Podcast. So a little bit of backstory. I've actually gained a little bit of weight. I've actually gained quite a bit of weight. While I was gaining the weight, I knew I was gaining the weight. I didn't care about gaining the weight. I went through a really horrible patch of grief. And, I have people tell me things like, man, you got to move past grief of losing your mom and this, that, and the other. And I don't want to get too deep into it, but what people don't understand is I've had compounding grief and loss that's been happening for, a long time. Person after person after person. And my immediate family, and that is people that I'm immediately descendants of or, immediately, only had a few to start with. And I've lost all of them. And it's happened in successive fashion. Look, I have extended family. I have aunts, uncles, and cousins. All of them are great people. Some of them are super great to me. Some of them are the best to me. And so it's not like I'm completely out on an island alone. But it's just not the same. And some days are easier than others. The patches of great or good times or decent times definitely are getting longer. But then it'll come back and hit me pretty bad sometimes, and it just did within the past month or so. So I had this really bad, debilitating level of grief hit me, and basically I laid in bed for nearly 2 weeks. I just didn't get out of. The only time I got out of bed was to go to the store to buy donuts, Little Debbie snack cakes, chocolate milk, Coke. I never did drink Coke. Coke Zeros though. But, I gained a lot of weight, gained a ton of weight over those couple of weeks. And then I tried my best to snap myself out of it. And I went through like a weekend, I think, where I did decent on keto. I definitely went back low carb, I'd say. I don't know if I got back keto, but I definitely went low carb. I don't think I went keto because I never got the debilitating headaches and fatigue and keto flu or anything. But I thought I'd be back on track. And then I had some things to take care of and related to my mom and the estate and property, and that stuff's just very difficult for me. I'm moving through it slowly but surely, but it's just never easy. I don't like being at the property. I don't like dealing with it. I don't like the fact that I'm selling it. I feel like, this has turned into something besides what I intended it to be. But I guess for you to understand the story, you need to know the backstory. So I'll try to speed it up and get through it. I promise you we're going to talk about 14 pounds in 4 days. I promise. Nevertheless, I got through that little spell I needed to get through barely, somewhat. I don't know if I was keto, but I was definitely trying to pay better attention to what I ate, and I was lower carb. And as soon as I got that over, I was right back into the throes of the grief. And I had signed up for the blackjack tournament in Biloxi, so I was going to Biloxi for 4 days. And I knew before I went that wasn't going to be good because I'd been out of keto now for probably three and a half weeks or something, close to 4 weeks. So I knew that Biloxi was going to be bad. I mean, I just knew it, and I accepted it before I went over there because I'm full-blown back carb craving, carb addicted, life revolving around carbs, plus the grief and all the mental aspect that comes with it. But I wanted to do something that maybe I would enjoy, and I was like, I'm just going to give into it or whatever, and I'm going to be determined when I get back to fix it. And so I'd say Biloxi was a good thing. I run horrible at poker. I've been running horrible at poker for a month. And no, it's not that I'm bad at poker, and it's not that you can't win at poker, and it's not that poker is gambling. Sometimes you can make all the right decisions in poker, and you can go through long spells where you lose, and that's been happening to me for about a month. Losing hands that I was a 98% favorite to win, 95% favorite to win, 90% favorite to win, and it just happens over and over. And you keep asking yourself, how long can this last? Well, the answer is it can happen a long time. But I just went through about 2 months where I won all those hands. Like I never lost an 80% hand or a 60% hand, or So I went through where I ran really good. So my losses still don't add up to all the wins I had when I was running really good. That's just the way poker is. Again, I'm talking about stuff that has nothing to do with this podcast, but I don't know how to share the story without sharing the story. So I'm sorry. I apologize for that. So I didn't run that great at poker, but I ran decent in the blackjack tournament. The thing about the blackjack tournament that I liked, and I hadn't played a blackjack tournament in a while, is I didn't quite make the best possible decisions in the first round that I should have. I came close, but I bought in again for a second round, and I played it perfect. Now, I didn't advance from the second round, but I played it perfect. And anytime I play perfect, I feel good, whether I win or lose. And I played the round perfect. I just got unlucky on the last hand. And then they had a second chance drawing where you could advance to a wild card round. And I was the first name they drew, and I'm very unlucky. And so just that happening put me in a good mood. I'm like, wow, something lucky happened to me. And so I moved to the wild card round, and I actually advanced from the wild card round to the second round. And once you made it to the second round, you were guaranteed, it was like $250. And so I locked up a win, and I played the wild card round, and I played the second round perfectly. I played them perfectly. The last hand of the second round, which would have sent me to the final table, where I would have made real good money, I was in the perfect position, and I made the perfect bet so that if the other guy next to me, who was the other big stack, there was two of us, we had been back and forth the whole round. You play 30 hands. And it was perfect. I made the perfect bet so that if he won and I won, I would win the match. I made the perfect bet so that if I won and he lost, I would win the match. And I made the perfect bet so that if we both lost, I would win the match. So 3 scenarios out of 4, I win. The only way he wins is if he wins the last hand and I lose the last hand. And obviously that's what happened. But I played the hand perfect, and blackjack is a highly luck-centric game, and it just didn't fall my way. But I left there feeling so good about that. And but I pigged out for 4 days, man. I ate so many donuts and cheesecake and pecan pie and all the Chinese food, which is all carbs. And I didn't eat that many mashed potatoes, really. I've gotten to where I'm not a mashed potato person that much anymore, but pasta, pizza, I mean, I pigged out. But I got back, and I'm definitely getting on track. And so here's where the headline of this podcast actually starts to manifest itself. You've been very patient. So, over the course of my grief and stuff, I gained a lot of weight. When when you go back full blown carb and you carb out and you're a person that's insulin resistant like I am, and probably like most of you are if it's hard for you to lose weight, the weight comes back way quick. It's so much easier to gain weight than it is to lose it. So I gained a lot of weight. Just the trip to Biloxi, which was, I'll call it 5 days, but I was really there 4 days, but it really stretches into 5 because I've junked out on the drive there and the drive back. So we'll call it 5 days. In that 5 days, I gained 24 pounds, a little more than 24 pounds. Now, that's a lot of weight to gain in 5 pounds. It's almost 5 pounds a day. Nevertheless, when I got back to my house, I stopped before I got home, made sure I had at Publix that I got plenty of good, high-quality keto foods, mainly beef and bacon, some eggs, and settled in to go hardcore keto, and I did. I think I pigged out that morning before I got home. I know I did. I stopped and got some more freaking donuts. I stopped and got donuts and chocolate milk on the way home. But once that morning was out of the way, I'm like, all right, this is it. We're on keto now. And so I ate a lot of food the rest of that day, but it was all keto food. The next day I was hardcore strict keto. And once 24 hours of being strict keto had passed, I got on the scale and noticed that I'd lost a decent amount of weight since I got back. Because I weighed when I got back. And I stayed strict keto. Well, day 2, the migraine headache came, the fatigue came, the feeling nauseated a little bit came, all the keto flu stuff came. And I was doing the salt and stuff like I'm supposed to do, but I hadn't done quite enough, I think. So late into the second day, I decided I needed to up it some more. I'm like, because by that time I was peeing, like literally every 1 to 2 hours I was peeing. And that's what happens when you go keto and you get off of a very high carb diet. Your body doesn't need all that water anymore. Once you flush the carbs out, your body uses water to suspend carbs. And once you get the carbs out, your body doesn't need the water anymore. So it just starts flushing it. And it flushed and flushed and flushed. And when it flushes water, you lose a lot of electrolytes. And that's salt and potassium, a little bit of calcium, and even some magnesium. So you got to replenish that, and if you don't, you're going to get keto flu. Well, I was replenishing it, but not good enough. So day 3, man, I just went hardcore with tons of salt in a glass of water and downed it. And I drank so much of it, it actually made me sick. It actually gave me nausea, bad nausea. I'd never throw up, but it gave me bad nausea. And then if you drink a lot of salt at one time, it'll cause diarrhea too. And so I got some of that. But it was enough that it started staving off the bad headache. It took it about 3 hours. And I laid in bed with the lights out, my hand over my eyes in silence, just with the worst migraine ever. I mean, it had hit its crescendo at that point. But after about 3 hours, it started going away a little bit. And by the next day, I did actually manage to fall asleep at some point. And the next day when I got up, I had just a very mild headache. And God, I was so happy for that. Nevertheless, along the way, I weighed and weighed and weighed and weighed. And over the period of 4 days, from the time I started the keto, exactly 4 days later, I'd lost 14 pounds. I'm going to guess 10 to 12 pounds of that was water. Just water. I mean, that's all it is, just water. And people are like, I've heard people scoff at water weight loss before. Oh, you're just losing water. Let me tell you something. If you're hauling around 12 pounds of water that you don't need, it's good to lose it. That's nothing to scoff at. Yeah, it's not weight loss. It's not fat loss, but it's still extra weight that you're carrying around that's weighing you down and making you feel bloated and sluggish and horrible and nasty. And losing it feels just as good as losing fat. I mean, you got to get rid of it. So I think I probably lost 12 pounds, maybe 11 pounds. I know that as big as I am, when I'm hardcore keto and eating the macros right, I know that I can lose between a half a pound and 1 pound of actual fat a day. I've documented that over the span I've been doing it. So maximum I lost probably 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds of fat those 4 days, but 10 to 12 pounds of water. And, I've helped so many people do this. I've seen it happen a million times. And I've also worked with people on keto that their first week, they only lost 2 or 3 pounds. Those people weren't that carved out to begin with. That's the difference. One, they probably weren't that as overweight as I am. That's part one. And part two is they probably weren't as carved out as I am. Like, I was carved out. Like, essentially, if you boil it down, I went 4 or 5 weeks where I ate nothing but sugar. I just lived off of junk. Donuts, Little Debbie snack cakes, chocolate milk, cheesecake, pecan pie. That was 90% of my diet. The other 10% of my diet was pizza, noodles, rice, egg rolls, sweet and sour sauce, and stuff I ate at Biloxi. So I was as carved out as a person can be. And so it over dramatizes the amount of water my body was retaining, and so that's why I was able to lose that much. So I thought sharing this story would share a few things. One, I had to go through keto flu for the second time in my life. That's the second time I went through it. The first time was when I first went keto. This time was way worse, by the way. Way worse. And the reason it was way worse is when I very first went keto, I didn't know how to do it that well, so I wasn't hardcore keto. I remember when I very first went keto, I couldn't hit 20 carbs. I tried and I didn't understand it and it didn't make sense, and I'd had like 50 carbs the first day, I think, and then I managed to get it to 40 carbs, and then I managed to get it to 35 carbs, and then I managed to get it to 30 carbs. So it was a stepping down kind of moderately process, and so the keto flu wasn't that bad for me. This time, I know how to do keto, and I know how to nail it, and I know how to hit my macros and keep those carbs super low. And so when you jump into that straight hardcore right off of a massive carb binge, oh baby, the keto flu is coming. And even with me taking the electrolytes, the salt and the potassium, I did plenty of salt, I thought, but I had to do even more because I should have known that, because I've never peed every hour. And this lasted for 2 days. I peed every hour or every other hour for 2 days straight. And I should have known that I needed to max up that salt because I was flushing so many electrolytes. Not just the salt, but the water too. I should have known that I really needed to double up on the water because I was losing so much. So, hindsight's 2020. I could have managed that a little bit better, but even managed it better, some level of keto flu was coming just because of the such dramatic change from what I was eating to what I switched to. Nevertheless, I think that my experience over the past month, and especially this past week, I think is a good learning type experience for people interested in the keto diet, in that you can lose a lot of weight quickly. Most of it will be water weight, but it'll get you well on your way to fat loss. 2, keto flu is a real thing, but you can deal with it and survive it. And 3, maybe depending on how carved up you are, not just jumping in and going hardcore keto from day one may not be the best thing for people, especially if you're not prepared and educated and mentally prepared for it, because it's hard. Those 2 days, see, like if I had a job, I'm very fortunate in the fact that, I don't have to work. I've for several different reasons, part of that preparations that I made, part of it selling a business that I had last year when my mom's health got to the point that I knew, we were to that stage, and other reasons. I won't get into all that, but I'm just fortunate enough that I don't have to go to a job every day. Boy, if you were doing keto and went through what I went through, there would have been no way I could have worked either of those 2 days, maybe even 3 days. I couldn't have went to work those days. I mean, I literally had a migraine so bad I could barely stand to keep my eyes open. So I have advocated in the past people going hardcore keto right from the get-go. I think I would probably change my recommendation on that, and I would say shoot for hitting 100 carbs a day the first day, maybe 75 carbs the next day, maybe 50 carbs the next day, then 40, then 30, then, maybe you plan it to where by day 7 you're hitting to 20 grams of carbs a day, so that you're stepping down and you're not flushing so much water and electrolytes so quickly. So that'd be my advice to you if you're thinking about going keto. The second reason that it was important to me to share this particular podcast was to share with you that sometimes things can happen and completely derail your success, and you have to decide how you'll respond to that. I completely sabotaged some of my success, and I gained, for some people it would be the entire amount of weight they even need to lose I would have gained back, but I have so much weight to lose it was just a percentage. but it was a big number that I gained back. I always knew that I'd fix it in the back of my mind, but I accepted that I was in a place that trying to fight the grief and trying to fight the diet together was too much for me. And so a man's got to know his limitations is one of my favorite movie quotes of all time. And I knew that I couldn't deal with both, which really wound up me not dealing with either, because I don't think I dealt with the grief that well, and I definitely didn't deal with the keto that well at all. But it's not where you are, it's where you wind up. And I feel better today. I'll say this. Carbs don't help grief or depression. They will help you while you're shoving them in your mouth. But when you're not eating, all the time in between when you're not eating, they cause you to feel worse. You have a worse mood. And this has been proven. And anybody I've ever worked with on keto, once they get into a state of ketosis, all of them talk about how great you feel. And I've experienced it. It's amazing. When you're in ketosis, your brain is clear, your thoughts are clear. Depression, it's very hard for depression to take over. When your brain is running off ketones rather than running off sugar, it just functions so much better. It's so much healthier. And so I've hit that point now where what is this? This is day 5. Day 5 or day 6, I think. So, I've hit that point now to where I think my brain is back running decent on ketones, and I feel some clarity, and I just feel better. I look back at that haze and fog of just grief and stuff that I went through, and I feel far removed from it now. I feel like I'm far removed from it, and that's a good feeling. I hope that I am. Nevertheless, I hope that this podcast can benefit you in some way, whether it encourages you, maybe you've fallen off the wagon, maybe you tried keto and the keto flu stopped you in your tracks as you gave up. Maybe you've lost some weight and gained some back, or just maybe it just gives you a better understanding of any number of issues I've discussed here, which is keto, success, grief, falling off the wagon, binge eating. There's a lot of subtext to this podcast. I covered a lot of subtext. And that's why I thought it was important to do this podcast. Normally I try to plan my podcast around a specific subject and try to be rather informative and concise about it. I knew this episode would just be me just free rolling about what had happened and just letting it out, which is cathartic for me too. So nevertheless, I hope that it's helped you in some way. And if it has, and you think maybe there's others that'll help, please share it. That's how I found keto. That's what got me to losing 125 pounds, which I have to get back to now. No, I definitely didn't gain all the way back. I have not gained 125 pounds back, in case that's what you're wondering. But I know people out there like, I need to lose 30 pounds or 25 pounds or whatever. I literally gained that in 4 weeks. So, less than 4 weeks. So, I have some work cut out for me to get back down to my low weight and then move on towards my goal. But I'm confident I'm going to hit my goal, and I'm reasonably confident now that I'm going to stay on track. I have difficult times ahead. I'm about to officially list my parents' property for sale, which is very hard for me. I still feel guilty about selling it, but I just don't need it and I can't use it. And it's just, if I just kept it just to keep it, it would just go downhill. It would become a wasteland, and hopefully somebody that will cherish it like they did will wind up owning it. I don't know. My mom and dad put so much man hours. I mean, my dad built that house himself. He built it above standards. He wanted a rock solid house, and he didn't really want to trust. There's two things to it. He knew he could get more house if he did it himself, because that's less money to have to spend hiring people. And two, he knew he had the expertise to do it, and he knew how to do it right, and he knew he could actually build it above code. So he did. I do believe building that house hastened his demise, though, because it took so much out of him. And I helped him some. But, at that time, I was working way away. And so I only got back home some days to help him. I do remember helping him a fair amount with the foundation and digging and pouring and that stuff. I wasn't that involved with the parts that came after that, but he did have brothers that came and helped him. And then he hired people to do sheetrock and the metal roofing, I know. But nevertheless, my point is this just, my parents, when I know how much they sacrificed and how we came from abject poverty to they actually strived their whole life to be able to build it, because we lived in crappy houses our whole lives. The first one had no plumbing, no heat, no air, and most of the time no electricity. I mean, we pooped and peed in the woods. That was the first 8 years of my life. The rest of my life until I left home was living in a house that was super old, built out of fat lighters. If one spark had gotten out of hand, the whole thing would have burned down in like 5 minutes. You could actually see holes through the walls. We had a wood heater, a window air conditioning unit. But look, it was a step up from the house we did live in. And through all of that, my mom finally got the house. Finally, they saved and persevered, and now I'm selling it. It's not easy emotionally to do that, but it's something that I struggle with daily. Nevertheless, I feel reasonably fine about that. Secondarily, I'm approaching the anniversary of my mom's passing. I'm thinking about it more and more. It was about this time that hospice was in now at this time. She may have even been in the I know it was early to mid. I think it was mid-August when she was actually hospitalized. So maybe early August. So I think by this point she was in the hospital, never to leave. And so I'm thinking about that a lot. So, I mean, I got things I got to get through. So, but I feel reasonably certain I'll get through them. All I know is this, is that once you have the knowledge of how to fix obesity, and make no mistake, a ketogenic diet is the way to fix obesity. There's nothing even comes close, because it so specifically targets insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. I've lost weight doing other things in a healthy way. When I was eating a whole food vegan diet, that worked pretty well. But it doesn't get the carbs low enough so that a insulin resistant person can keep their carbs low enough to get dramatic, insane weight loss results. You can get decent weight loss results, and that would be, to me, that'd be the second best diet. But keto's better by far. I've just rambled on. If you're still listening to this, you are a trooper. You have made it through a lot of my personal regurgitation of my life, and so thank you for that. Hopefully it helps you. I guess I probably can't be the only one that experiences these things, so maybe it's somebody's experienced some of this, and I don't know, maybe it helped you. Hope it did. Thanks for listening. Thanks for following us on social media. Keto on.